Sales doesn't need to be hard or overcomplicated. That's not my way of saying that sales is easy. Rather, I'm saying that you can have a successful career in sales if you develop a process and execute on it consistently. This channel is dedicated to what a sales process framework could look like and showcasing the different best and worst practices around the different steps of a sales process. The intention is to publish short, weekly videos that are easily digestible with clear action items that you can begin using today. Welcome to Sunday Sales Staples. Today's topic is going to cover another important tool a sales professional needs to get right in order to win new business: their proposal deck. If you work for a company that uses a visual presentation when you're in meetings with decision-making teams, then it's vital to review the best practices so that you build a compelling argument as to why companies should invest in a solution like yours. And before we go into these best practices, I want to share a story. Years ago, when I was an account executive for a startup, they had a pre-built deck that everyone on the team used because it was built by our founding sales manager. After a couple of months going over this deck in multiple presentations, I noticed a few things. One, our prospects weren't necessarily engaged in discussion throughout the meetings. Two, prospects weren't necessarily paying attention even during the important parts like reviewing their return on investment. And three, after the meeting was over, prospects were delaying their decisions on whether or not to purchase the product. I knew that these meetings needed to improve, or else I would probably be looking for another role within months. I looked at the data and surveyed my counterparts, and we came to a conclusion that our deck needed a makeover in order to improve win rates and decrease average deal time. Our existing deck was about 20 slides long. It talked about our founding team and how they started the company at the very beginning of the meeting. It then went into our existing customers and the testimonials that they gave us. We jumped into industry insights, and then we wrapped it up with a discussion around ROI for the prospect that was sitting right in front of us. Overall, these meetings lasted about 30 minutes, where our AEs would talk for about 25 minutes, and there would be roughly 5 minutes of Q&A at the very end. This meant that our account executives spent over 80% of the meeting talking about how great our product was. None of this was good. A few account executives, including myself, banded together to draft a new template for these decks. We shifted the focus away from us and put it more on the prospect, highlighting their current process and their pain points. We were nervous to introduce this new deck to our sales manager since they were the one that had originally put it together, but they actually welcomed the change with open arms. After just 1 month of using this new deck, we were having more meaningful conversations with prospects, our win rates increased, and the average deal length decreased. And after 3 months of using this new deck, we nearly doubled our monthly sales goals. It's crazy what a little tweak like this can do for revenue. Now, let's review what changes we made by jumping into the best practices that we gathered from this exercise. The first thing we nixed was how much focus we put on ourselves during the presentation. Instead of talking about our features and benefits, we needed to focus on the value that it was going to provide the prospect. The next was the length of the presentation. In the original deck, we had 20 slides, which was far too many, and we were covering too much information in too little a time. By cutting it down to around 8 to 10 slides, we allowed a much more robust conversation on the important topics like the prospect's current state versus a future state, and the ROI that they could get from our solution. You can always include slides in an appendix and then send the deck over to the prospect afterwards for them to review the additional information. Next was the value propositions. Instead of coming in with general boilerplate value props that we use for every presentation, we tailored these value props depending on the buyer personas within the meeting. Generally, you will have 5 to 8 decision makers in the room when it's time to give a presentation, and they come from all different departments: finance, marketing, operations, revenue, etc. When you were doing your discovery, you should have identified the metrics of importance for each decision maker so that you can use that information to craft the specific value propositions for this team when you're giving your final presentation. Along with engaging your decision makers with their own specific value propositions, you can get them involved by sprinkling in questions throughout the presentation. I'm not saying these questions should be something like, how is this looking for the group? Or are there any questions on the information I just presented? Rather, you should have a preset list of questions that you can pull from to make sure people are paying attention and communicating. If there's someone from finance, you could ask something like, what questions do you have specifically regarding the ROI slide from your current state versus your future state? Or if there's someone from marketing, you could ask, by reducing your marketing spend by 25% while reaching the same amount, if not more, customers, where could you allocate that additional budget? Getting prospects involved throughout the conversation makes them engage in ways that they are not used to when it comes to pitches like these. And the final best practice is fewer words on the slides. If you muddy up your slides with too much verbiage, then your prospects will end up reading more than engaging with the discussion. Depending on your slide, you should aim for no more than 5 key points or words, accompanied by an additional 2 to 4 words. An example could be something like ROI as your keyword, and then underneath it, the accompanying words could be 25% reduction in budget. The fewer words, the better. That wraps up this week's overview of proposal decks, and I appreciate you checking out the video. If there are any best practices that you use that I did not cover, then please add them in the comments below. And if you want to dig deeper into the skill of putting together presentations, then I highly recommend checking out some articles that you can easily find on Google. Some people will have similar ideas to mine, and others will differ, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to craft your own proposal deck, and I do hope there were some key takeaways that you can begin using today. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, sales does not need to be hard. While sales is becoming vastly more complex with metrics and data, your process doesn't need to be so convoluted that it isn't easily replicated. Keep coming back to this channel to learn more about how to simplify your process and win new business. And feel free to email me at sundaysalesstaples@gmail.com or reach out on Instagram at sundaysalesstaples. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll catch you next week.